Today we're going to walk through the evolution of business process management. Certainly a lot of changes are taking place, and we have an expert here who can help us walk through some of that. That's Mark McGregor, Head of Strategy at Signavio, and we appreciate you visiting us today.
Well, thanks. It's always great to be out here in Boston and great to take the opportunity to come and meet with you guys.
Well, it's great to have you. So certainly we've had a little bit of a chance to chat beforehand, and there's a really interesting story going on here. But what I'd like to do is take a step back really and talk about how we got here. So Signavio is only about 10 years old, right? So you've really, as a company, seen this transformation taking place. Give us a little bit of background about how we got to where we are right now in this kind of inflection point.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. So you should say Signavio has been around at 10 years and actually started and joined at a significant inflection point. So Signavio started out in the process management space and the process modeling space at a time when everyone said the market's saturated, there's small players, everyone's done this process stuff. They've been doing it since '94. Here we are in 2009. There isn't room for a vendor. And now here we are 10 years on, Deloitte Fast 50 growth for 4 years running, significant revenue, significant growth, 250 people now working all around the globe. So something changed, to your point. What changed was actually to stop developing specialist tools for specialists, or as I talk about it, the choir preaching to the choir and not talking to the congregation. So right from the outset, Signavio started by saying, what if we could democratize this whole concept of process modeling, and what if we could take these process models out to everyone in the enterprise and get a wider group of people working?
Well, and that's a common theme among a lot of the technology categories we cover, that idea of really unleashing the power of these technologies to folks that typically hadn't had access to it.
Yeah, and indeed I have to say that in my preparation for coming here today, I was watching one of the interviews you did of a guy recently whose name escapes me, and I apologize to him in advance, but he was talking about data and BI and analytics. And I think the thing for us that's similar is the old guard can't create the future. And this is so similar to some of the other things that we may be talking about here in terms of our customers, is that it's so hard for incumbents to move and recognize that the world is different. The idea of an incumbent risking, shall we say, $50 or $100 million of on-premise license revenue and moving to a cloud-based model where someone's paying $100 or $200 subscription model doesn't fit with the cost base that you were carrying. But it also says that, well, would you start again building on cloud? Why do I create something that's easy? I thought my product was simple. Unless you look from the outside in. And as with our customers, if you look from the outside in, you realize that your business isn't quite as simple, or your products aren't quite as simple.
Well, and that's really the challenge right now, right? Isn't it that organizations, the complexity that is happening at the enterprise level is just doubling, increasing exponentially, and the old ways just don't work anymore, and so there is room for new thinking.
There is room for new thinking. I mean, for us, we've seen it in our own growth in terms of the growth of the company, the types of products that we're doing, but conversely, we're seeing it in the clients that we're working with. And some of the nuances, I mean, when we were talking earlier, we talked a little about looking at inside-out thinking versus outside-in thinking. We weren't using those words, but I'm going to use them now. So, for example, how many process modeling tools and process management tools where you guys have looked at them in the solution review actually encompass customer journey mapping? And it's quite a tough sell. I'll make it really simple. You know, our audience is the process improvement community who don't get necessarily customer journey mapping because they've got a customer experience team that are doing that. But customer experience teams tend, generalization, to be managing a sales pipeline, not actually saying, hey, I need to look at my business through the eyes of my customer and then connect that to the underlying operations and ask that says, well, actually, hang on a minute, my operations are completely wrong. All these silos, handoffs. Well, hey, Doug, it was fantastic, but I can't deal with that. But let me put you over to Sue. Well, you don't want to be transferred from Doug and Sue. That's the organizations created those silos. And so what we're seeing now is as we move around that business transformation, digital disruption, whether it's complexity, I see hyper-scalability, I think is the new buzzword to transcend. Okay, they're all just about saying we've got to keep transforming. But it means transforming from what the customers and the market's demanding not the way that we're operating.
But that's really where you get the foothold in the organization, right? You're looking for that champion, that initiative that says, we have to think about things differently. We have to take a look at all of our processes and really start to break them down and approach them with the kind of new solution that might, unearth a new thinking.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of the ideal customer profile. I mean, if someone is just doing incremental process improvement documentation, our tool does a great job, and we've got many customers that are out there that are doing that. But you're right that our perfect customer is the guy that says, well, I recognize I still need to do that, but I need to come at it from a different place. Either because I need to create new business models, or because I want to enter new markets, or whether I want to make a significant change, and I want a different way of approaching the overall change that then filters down into those things. I mean, we talk about it as combining facts with feelings.
So where in the organization are you targeting in that?
Yeah, so I mean, in the US, it's a lot harder because of the way job titlings go. But typically, shall we say, that's going to be likely a VP of transformation, VPs of operational excellence, at those kind of levels. With the process intelligence piece of the transformation suite, we're seeing a little more interest from things like CFOs who are actually trying to dive into some of their particular systems. But there's not necessarily hey, we're going to rush off and pitch to CFOs. It is that process transformation or process business transformation community that is our core audience.
Well, and it's a two-tiered approach really that they're taking, right? And it's not only, hey, I want to transform my business processes and I want to put some new thinking in it, but I need to think about what we're going to use to do that. And that's where you start to get pushed down in the organization as after that event happens, they potentially implement that, then you're now being used at the lower levels to.
Yeah, I mean, from an analysis and design point of view, it's largely middle out. So we might start at that VP level. You might take it up from a bigger business transformation to a strategy group, for example, particularly in M&As, where we're seeing increasing interest now in using technologies like ours to actually assist with M&As, and not from necessarily the delivery of the results that we've told the stock market, but actually as part of the due diligence. Well, let me have a look. Do these systems really work together? If I'm going to bring these two organizations, do they really fit? Is there an overlap? Before I go and make my statement that I'm going to merge with company X or acquire company Y, and I'm going to take $3 billion of costs and it's going to Well, let's see whether it can, because we all know that the statistics on success of delivering of these cost and synergies doesn't.
And so you're finding examples like that. That's an interesting kind of offshoot of how people would typically think about it. But honestly, using BPM as a way to see whether things are going to mesh across acquisitions is very interesting.
So absolutely, but just being a little specific, I'm talking about using process management rather than BPM. As we talked about earlier, BPM means lots of different things. So anyone watching this video,
right,
the chances are when we use the word BPM, someone's going, oh, I know what they mean. And they all mean something different.
Well, that is one of the challenges. So, we do talk about BPM a lot. We talk about ERP. We talk about a lot of things because, those are the categories that.
But I mean, Microsoft would say they're a BPM.
You're an old Gartner guy.
Well,
you know all about these category names.
Absolutely. But if you think about it, Microsoft might say they're a BPM vendor because Visio does business process mapping.
Right.
Okay. Companies like Signavio would say they're a BPM vendor because they do business process modeling, which is not the same as the guys in the big MQs that are doing business process management systems.
Right.
Which might be old style workflow on steroids or something different, but all
so
being lumped together.
So using that as a jumping off point to go forward, where do you see your head of strategy? You're thinking about the future. Where do you, and you're a Gartner, old Gartner guy, where do you see this headed?
I think we're at a really exciting time. So there's the combination of facts with feelings. I still believe there is massive amounts of growth in the traditional process analysis and design space. Now, there are those that would say I'm drinking the stuff and have been around too many years. But I'm watching the stuff that Signavio is doing, which is opening it up to wider possibilities by making it simpler and easier. However, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It doesn't exist in a vacuum, and it's things like the collaboration hub that we have and our process intelligence piece that's adding a richness. So that automated process discovery, either to create the models that you want to analyze, more quickly, or whether it's the collaboration of to actually share the information. I mean, most modeling initiatives or mapping initiatives fail because it wasn't shared with the rest of the organization. I mean, we were running some numbers the other week of saying how much our business could grow if our current customers, we did a straw employee count and said, well, gee, if every one of our customers bought Collaboration Hub for every one of their employees, hey, we could double our revenues. But we can look at it, well, that's unlikely, or we can look at it and said, and if they're not doing it for everyone, every customer, for every employee, we've got a couple of things at fault. Have we got some other stuff we need to do to make the technology work for that? And we're working on that. We've got some really exciting stuff coming. Or the second part is, are we talking to the wrong person in the organization that doesn't recognize the value of everyone being on the same page? Look at customer satisfaction in the US. How much has it gone up over the last 20 years as an overall index? The needle's barely moved. The needle's barely, well, why? As a consumer, what's our most, inconsistency in the way that we're treated. Well, why are we treated inconsistently? Because the staff that we're working with don't have the available information that says this is how to deal with this situation.
So so with regard to that, so that would indicate to me that we're still early in the adoption curve. How early?
Ooh. So early in the adoption of process for the masses, then I would say, hey, we haven't even touched 10, 20% of that potential market. Now, to your point, like any of these curves, who knows whether it'll peak out at 30 or 40%. We all know that
Sure.
we can hive out the numbers, but we're still really early, and still the majority of people using process analysis and design tools are still largely across the globe in the specialist community. So there's still a lot of work to be done by the specialists. As we were talking about earlier, if those specialists, those process analysts that might be watching and listening to us, or those business analysts, if they can't get the models that they create being used by the rest of the organization and finding ways to have them build models and get involved, they're probably going to have no future.
So I'm curious, do you think that's a cultural thing, North American cultural thing versus, I mean, I know you guys are from Germany.
Sure.
As a founding entity, so, and certainly that's, stereotypically more mechanically efficient.
Stereotypically, the US is more interested in, well, what's it going to do for this quarter's results? We all know that as the standard joke. But the US less values analysis and design is more to rush off and implement. And I just wonder how many more times we're going to implement. Well, we've tried workflow, we've tried BPMS, we've tried ERP, we're putting out BPA, as Forrester was saying, we're putting in our, how many times are we going to keep doing these things until someone says, maybe if we thought about what we were going to do and think before we act, we could save more. But a part of that is that even as a modeling tool vendor, I tell all our own people, we have to remember that nobody wants models. Even though we sell modeling tools, seems kind of crazy, doesn't it? We have to remember that actually they have a problem to solve, that a model is the most sensible way of helping solve the problem. It isn't the model. It's what we're going to do with the model, how we're going to use it, what answers we're going to get, and how it helps us. And sometimes we can get a little lost in the drawing pretty pictures and actually not looking at saying, well, what questions am I going to answer?
So how do you crack the code there? How do you overcome that sort of, I don't know if it's an objection as much as it's maybe just a blockage?
Yeah, so the best way of getting around it in any market is really referential selling, and let your customers sell to customers, because there's a point at which you need to be the one to get out of the way, and let those that have made the mistakes talk to those that said, I made those too, and this is what I'm doing differently. And so gradually building that up and working around through it, through education, through hope, because you can't get enough. You've got to have hope. But for us, it's just so exciting because we're getting so much interest. I mean, obviously I'm not going to share detailed numbers, but I was sharing at a meeting that I'm at today, that the volume of leads that are coming into Signavio on a quarterly basis are like nothing that I've ever seen in my life. The level of interest and the level of, I've just not seen it in this space. Maybe in other spaces, but in this space, having worked for many of those other vendors, know what the calls, you say the calls we were getting at GART and everything else, never seen that level of interest before.
And so, so that speaks to the business case. So why is that happening, do you think?
So I think that there's many different reasons. I mean, there is no single reason. If I had the single reason, my COO would be really, really happy with me.
But it's not necessarily the buyer reason, but it's the seller reason. What's
Sure.
the business case about a system like Signavio that's causing that
So
sort of
people
interest?
like the fact that, as I said before, that something that's simple, easy to use, easily understandable, takes no 3-day training courses, that you can just bring it in and get going and deliver some results very quickly. Are they the best results? Well, probably not, because it's skill, the fool with the tool paradigm, so the more you know. But you can get useful results. But at the same time, it's also powerful enough to support the power users and give them all the things that they're used to in historical tools. But the thing that is really interesting is the way that they can share that stuff around. And it's just some of the silly uniqueness. I mean, why should you have to draw a picture to draw a process map? What if you could just type I do this, then this, then this, then this into a spreadsheet, and it drew the map for you? What if, rather than saying, well, I want to compare, and you get 2 text lists that says, well, here's the difference between the two. Yeah, I'm trying to work it out, I can't figure it out. What if you could get that visual comparison straight there, right in front of your face, and you could then start to have a system that allowed you to compare, not with the as you thought, or indeed the as implemented, which frequently people look at, but what if as executed? Because there's 3 different models. I mean, we talk about process intelligence and pointing that automated process discovery at things like SAP and in procure to pay, and what we realized that we had this model that we created, which is the theory of what we wanted to implement. There's this other one that the implementer said, well, this is how we implemented it in SAP, for example. And then when we go and run the intelligence on it, it says, it ain't working how you thought. 1,500 people, here's all the variations, here's the compliance issues, and there's stuff sparking out of there that you go, actually, we really don't know how we work anymore. And that's only in one system. And how many systems do you operate? I mean, if we talk SAP, people talk about procure to pay, but actually, if you're in a procure to pay end-to-end process, did it all exist in SAP? Or were there some other bits in other systems? Did you have maybe a workflow system that someone did for a requisition? Did you have some other system that someone did for recording? Were there manual steps? Unless you step back up, you can't get that holistic view.
Yeah, no, it's truly encouraging from our perspective to see a category that some people may have said is, kind of peaked out, taking that next evolutionary step and really moving to a whole nother audience, suite of implementations. It's great. So Mark, thanks very much for being here. Appreciate you stopping by. We would encourage you to go to solutionsreview.com, check out our BPM site and our ERP site and any of our other work tech sites, in addition to going to signavio.com and checking out everything that they're offering. Thanks very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
You bet.